And so this is going to go down the center I-beam in my Raft, and it's hopefully going to push out the center I-beam. Alright, hell yeah. So there you go. So that's a lot more rocker than we had. And the boat is essentially pivoting right on that point. And so, hell yeah, how does it feel? Yeah, and so that's that V shape. Alright, hell yeah. And what this doesn't do is it still doesn't allow me to get to the back. The back pivot point is right there. See, I can feel that pivot point. You know what I mean? I gotta get all the way back to get to that one, which is too much. Let's do the 3/4. The 3/4 is perfect. You know what I mean? Because I want the main pivot to be like right here, maybe in the middle. That's what we're experimenting with. A second pivot off of 45 right here, but then a third pivot just when I come back. And this kind of does, you know what I mean? Alright, hell yeah. So this kind of pivots, but I would have to get to this position, and that's just a little bit harder to get to, where I would rather to get to that position just by like right here. Right, hell yeah. Same thing with up front, you know what I mean? The pivot point is literally right there, and so to get any push over that pivot, and this part of the boat is fairly flat anyway. Yeah, that pivot is so far back here. Yeah, as long as this can still get forward momentum and do all the things that I want it to do, I think this will be really sweet. And especially because the pivot point's right here, you know what I mean? I'm able to get, you know, to maybe 3/4 over here. Yeah, just dynamically we can do kind of different things. And so here's the side surf position. If I'm holding a side surf, now I just want the pivot point to be on the middle and me, and I want to be able to kind of aggressively lean that back. So there you go. Alright, hell yeah. So we got some foam for Harbor Freight, and we used one of those pieces to get this profile. And so this is going to go down the center I-beam in my Raft, and it's hopefully going to push out the center I-beam and give it that signature, you know, V shape. So hell yeah. And this is a piece of hardwood, a couple socks on the end, and then foam with electrical tape to get that curve. Booyah. Alright, hell yeah. So I think I did a good job of measuring it, you know what I mean, pushing it all the way to the ends and not leaving too much room. And so hopefully the thwart helps push that down. Alright, let's pump it up. Alright, hell yeah, check it out. We got a compressor with a cork, and then we have this, and check this out. Alright, and I've already run this, but yeah, there's so much air just in this one tank, you know what I mean? I don't know how many boats you could top off, but I can top off my entire boat. Hell yeah. Alright, hell yeah, moment of truth. Now you be the judge. I really don't see the V shape 100%, but it's pretty decent, you know what I mean? And yeah, inflatables, it's hard to get 100%. Like that tube is a little bit bigger, I think. I think the perimeter, I think it's opposite of a triangle. You know what I mean? Where those two tubes on the side are a little bit taller, which gives me a bigger stair step and a bigger sideways platform when it gets onto that platform. But I think the secret sauce for tomorrow is this is giving me hella rocker, and it's a little bit off center. I think the main part of the rocker is just right there, but still hard to tell. You know, now you can see it. So hell yeah. And it's kind of cool to have a boat that is functionally like asymmetric, because you can run it two different ways and try it out. Now, the only thing that I'm missing on this is to reduce that stair step, or bring that stair step from there and bring it in a whole foot and then square it off. Well, but we talked about in other videos that we do want this wide patch through here, because that wideness is stable and it gives us that 3/4 pivot. And this pivot we do want at an angle, you know what I mean? So I wish it was just a little bit more squared off, because it kind of comes to a drastic point. So that's the improvements that I would change. I would make that squared off, and then keep, you know, a hinged angle here, but then just move it forward a whole foot, and hell yeah. And then you can kind of play around with whatever modifications of the front of the boat you want. Okay, hell yeah. So I think we're all set for tomorrow. So I think there's a huge difference here. It is definitely higher rockered. Let's turn the boat over and see if it has more side to side. We were trying to get more rocker when we sit in the middle of the boat, so let's check that out. All right, hell yeah. Just with that one thing, we have a huge improvement. I gotta set up the tripod because it's like super rolly. So hell yeah, let's set up the tripod. All right, hell yeah. So there you go. So that's a lot more rocker than we had. And the boat is essentially pivoting right on that point. And so that's kind of what we would want and expect. And so, hell yeah, how does it feel? Yeah, and so that's that V shape. And so this is cool because if I want a high side, all I have to do is actually just move to center and put a hand over here, and I can angle that. All right, this is giving me the V shape. And what I notice is that if I'm over here on this V, because now it is a V shape, you know, that's hella out of the water, but my sitting position is a little bit crooked. And so this is where you want to foam that out, almost make like a lip to where, hey, you either have something to push against or you're just sitting flat. Like obviously this is just a chunk of foam. All right, hell yeah. And what this doesn't do is it still doesn't allow me to get to the back. The back pivot point is right there. See, I can feel that pivot point. You know what I mean? I got to get all the way back to get to that one, which is too much. Let's do the 3/4. The 3/4 is perfect. You know what I mean? Because I want the main pivot to be like right here, maybe in the middle. That's what we're experimenting with. A second pivot off of 45 right here, but then a third pivot just when I come back. And this kind of does. You know what I mean? All right, hell yeah. So this kind of pivots, but I would have to get to this position, and that's just a little bit harder to get to. Where I would rather to get to that position just by like right here. You know, so I got my legs wedged in. I'm still on this outside, but I can kind of push in to this stern position. And then, you know what I mean, then you can start engaging stern moves if you can actually get dynamics back there. All right, hell yeah. Same thing with up front. You know what I mean? The pivot point is literally right there. And so to get any push over that pivot, and this part of the boat is fairly flat anyway. Yeah, that pivot is so far back here. And so that's what we need, is just when you're here, just roll back on a pretty high pivot. And so that means that functionally we can really narrow down an R1 boat. So as long as this can still edge tomorrow, yeah, as long as this can still get forward momentum and do all the things that I want it to do, I think this will be really sweet. And especially because the pivot point's right here, you know what I mean? I'm able to get, you know, to maybe 3/4 over here. Yeah, just dynamically we can do kind of different things. And so here's the side surf position. If I'm holding a side surf, now I just want the pivot point to be on the middle and me, and I want to be able to kind of aggressively lean that back. So there you go. Hell yeah. In a normal stance, just sitting here, I wanted that thing to be 8 to 9 inches, 8 to 10 inches out of the water, and I can even go a little bit farther. For whatever reason, I feel like this has almost a little bit of a secondary edge. Not quite. And hell yeah. Alright, so let's maybe measure that and play around just a little bit more. Alright, that piece of foam is 6 inches. So I just kind of want to see, you know, what you can see. Hell yeah. And even just one of the techniques I'm using is I'm high-siding, but then also pushing down, you know, like grabbing something over here. And that same thing I'm grabbing is the perimeter line, but that can be like a more like jugged hand-hold surface. You know what I mean? That also helps pull you in the boat. And so hell yeah, like 4-inch drop stitch works really well. Alright, it's hard to tell, you know, if this actually is freeing up. So let me set it right there and see if I can actually get it to unweight itself. So this is, you know, if I was bouncing on a lean, I could do that. But see, I'm out of dynamics. Alright, so I'm out of dynamics, you know what I mean? To actually get this thing to tip over more, I'm like tipping over a box. And that's the thing, is like you want to tip over onto sides, on these bump outs, on these flats, on these stair steps. And so I'm missing this last stair step, and that's where I want a trapezoidal bump out coupled, and that can be coupled with a place to put my hip. I'm just rolling over this, so to push up against, you know, a piece of 4-inch drop stitch and have that go down close to the water's edge that I could even put it into the water. All right, hell yeah. And I guess you could just have that go straight down like a 4-inch chunk straight vertical. You could angle it out this way, you could angle it the other way, a 60 degree. So, but all said and done is I want to be able to lean just a little bit farther and hit another flat spot where I could just do all day out here. And that one is the one where, man, it'd be sweet if your hip could actually go down. And I'm just thinking on the fly, but hell yeah, there's times where it's just like, if I'm high siding, I don't mind getting lower out here, but there has to be a place where I stop. Alright, so two things. It's either a place where I could actually do a high brace and I'm kind of tucked in here, or where I could give up and then actually, you know what I mean? I did one where you sit down, so the bump out, if you put pressure into it, it goes flat to the water, and then you actually have something kind of easy to climb up. But I guess all said and done, I just want that second rocker position, and then, you know, just to be able to engage it with my hip. So when I go out here, I'm on a, like right now I'm so maxed out of just falling out of the boat. Alright, that hell yeah, this has to be a capitalized position. Because like I can hold my feet in, I just have nothing to sit on. And it's like the most slippery like slope right here. So this just come out to like a hard edge and be like, hell yeah. Alright, sweet. And let's talk about, could this be lower? So I just put my leg right there for bracing, but that is irrelevant to all this material. So all this material right here, I don't mind, I don't know. You know, we're just talking about how I need to sit on it. Alright, so if I'm honest, I don't want to get rid of any of this material. And I'm just thinking, like, is this rounded surface the best? Probably, because it's nice and taper. It fits the leg pretty good. I don't think you could make a foam contour, you know, to where like you actually get to, you know, make an impression of foam in there. And just because this surface right here is the only thing that we're gripped into. But yeah, let's think about that. If you did make a foam impression of your leg, you know, that you knew it had a little bit of movement. Alright, hell yeah. So I think that would be pretty good. And, you know, because this is the position we're going to be locked in. I'm going to go a second route here before we kind of experiment more. Let's take a look at this leg. I've always wanted to do a tutorial on how we're not just sitting on our hip. I'm not just leaning over on my hip, because that is a very unstable place. I'm using this part of the leg and I'm laying it flat. And so I'm getting all my stability. So I can R1 paddle with both feet not wedged in, just kind of maybe like tucked right here and tucked right there, but with almost zero pressure, just using my legs as counter levers. Alright, hell yeah. So this hip right here is what I'm really pushing on. This is my flat surface. And when I'm leaning out, you know, these feet kind of just push and hold me. But this, I almost consider it like a plank of wood. That thigh is resting across that tube right there. So if you're doing like offside paddling and you're wondering, you know, why it's feeling so bad, you're probably not putting any pressure onto this hip, you know what I mean, for stability. Alright, we got hella bells, so let's just kind of jump around. Definitely want, alright, hell yeah, we lost some footage there, but yeah, I definitely want, you know what I mean, a pivot to where that front end comes way up, you know what I mean, because if we are at the back of this is how much you can get that up, and that rocker needs to be like right here. It has to be really aggressive, so when I get up to the front, I can lean over onto that rocker. Right now I'm leaning on a flat surface. Alright, hell yeah. And so what I notice when I'm over here, this is the 3/4 release, is I can feel the physics behind the floor having an angle like this, and it's lower and it's hinging on that. And so that's what I feel. I feel that hinge. When I come back here, I don't feel a second hinge. If I come over here, I feel that same 3/4 hinge. So hell yeah. And I think this is just, no one's ever realized this, is because the standard Raft, the bottom of it doesn't look like a whitewater kayak. Alright, so how do we bring more stability in? Because this is a really rounded surface. Sure, we have these flat edges. We talked about how that's superior than just a fully rounded edge. But I want to remove the middle I-beam. Right now the middle I-beam is the lowest point because that's what we modified. I want to remove, I still want the first 3 I-beams to be lower for a visual, and then remove the middle one. And so that would be a gap, and you would mesh over it, and in the water the surface would have an 8-inch I-beam ridge, and so that would provide tracking. Alright, but hell yeah, when surfing a hole, it'll actually kick you to the top of a hole. What happens in a round boat, if I'm surfing up against a hole, it really centers my whole boat to the bottom, where a paddle cat can actually get this tube up, and then that tube is kind of surfing at the bottom. And so having a ridge right there kind of allows me to low side onto that ridge and catch current. And so hell yeah, I think you do want that in bigger holes as a river running feature. It might not be in the playboat mode, but hell yeah, as a river runner, you want to be able to get to the top of holes to make your exit out of holes. Alright, hell yeah. And previously, if you were in a hole, this end would just bite and it would really send you, and almost uncontrollably, into a flip. It'd almost be impossible to not flip. And so what this release allows is that for that knot to catch so easily and then have a second catch underneath. And instead of having a fin, this vacancy also acts as like a turbid area where you can release, but still is lengthwise where you can still hopefully is good with tracking. And I'm talking just like an 8-inch gap. You can make that gap wider, and then you essentially have a paddle cat. And so sky's the limit of how much you want to remove from that gap and just have a meshed over surface. Alright, so I'm stoked for tomorrow, you know what I mean? I imagine I might get some instability, but just the physics of this, like working on the side surf, it should just be absolutely awesome. Someone was just like, hey, looks like your boat surfs better with you not in it than it does with me in it. And so the fact that this tube is going to be released, I think, you know, and just the fact that when I am, actually it's more this, on that small wave, why it surfs so good is because the boat was low siding over here. And so if I get just this section on, it's a whole nother boat. Alright, I love this because it's just coming together in my mind. Yes, if in that footage where the boat's surfing, it's actually surfing on this tube and trying to kick this one out. And so this portion of the boat is the only thing that's surfing. And so I can surf this portion of the boat now because I can get to the middle, and it's not just going to fully weight this tube. I can be right in the middle and I can release that tube and then low side this tube. And so that's a huge deal. Yeah, so this is amazing. And if you think about it, this section of the boat can be the same design for a paddle cat. And so you have a gap, and then even on a paddle cat, you have an edge, and you could release the other tube of a paddle cat. Alright, hell yeah. So I'm just kind of throwing things together. But let's go over this offside. So if this is the offside, and you're trying to learn your offside, you're probably going to sit upright. You're probably going to wedge your feet in, and your contact point's going to be super low, right down on your shin. And that's fine, but this will change. If you're able to do this on your strong side, of using this flat spot on your hip, this is the game changer for offside. Alright, hell yeah. So when I'm out here, I'm just able to get so much more leverage. Now here's the crazy thing. I'm just like literally pulling myself in just by the counterbalance and a little bit of pressure on my toes. But because I'm so far out, I'm not able, like as I move in, like we talked about, I can push off this hip. And even just thinking about it, if I move this foot in behind me, that really allows me to roll off this foot. So if I need to get over there fast, you know, just really using this hip as a foot to push off. Yeah, the thigh part, using that as a foot to push off. All right, and I didn't realize this until doing a lot of spins, is like, yeah, I'm actually doing this. I'm moving this foot underneath me because that's where my center of mass is, and this just provides a pivot point. But to roll over that, I'm using this flat spot of the hip to push off. And so that's going to be the fastest way. And I like to have both feet forward. Fastest way to get over there, get this foot underneath me and push off. So let's do that in fast motion. Hell yeah. Alright, and this is a really good skill. So I would drop the paddle because for whatever reason, I'm able to get this foot underneath me and then push off with the hip. So easy. But this side, you know what? This leg is the one that had surgery on it. And so that is why this move, getting the leg underneath and then pushing off, that's why my spins are harder. This is my stronger side, but this leg is actually weaker. And that spring motion is almost a physical therapy move, where over here, and this is where it's just like, if you're stronger on one side, feel what you're doing. Because that time I'm just rocking forward and getting over here. So it's just like, that's it. It's just bad technique. And this makes sense. I'm getting this foot underneath me, rocking over it, and that's going to be, this foot acts as the pivot point. Here's my center of mass, and then I can rock over it. All right, hell yeah. All right, booyah. I just want to kind of practice the side to side. And the fact that, hell yeah, I can now low side the boat from here. I can be low sided and then high side. Now this tube is so effectively above the water. It's just as far above the water had I been in the neutral position all the way over here. So this for tomorrow, this is where, like, hey, now this is my R1 boat. It's like 36 inches. It's very small side to side. So we're gonna see how that works side surfing. All right, hell yeah. I'm just gonna show you from this back compartment. There's not too many waves that I've been able to, size-wise, because my waves are usually pretty small. But I'll try it out. I'll try to get to this back compartment and try to do some straight surfs. It's going to be easier to transition back and forth, because people are just like, hey, I want to surf straight and then carve back and forth. Well, to do that, that's going to require you to switch positions. Now that's not 100% fundamentally true, because if I'm turning that way, I could low side turn, you know what I mean, and that's going to be almost your stronger turn to get across something. And then on the way back, if I'm turning that way, I'm just going to be on the high side. And so technically, from a technical standpoint, you can do a lot of moves from one side. But when you're just, carving, from one side of a wave to the other, this is going to be the technique you're going to be probably using. All right, but you know what I mean? These are the nuances I don't mind exploring. If I'm going that way and doing kind of a low side turn across the wave, man, I mean, we're just ready to turn and do a full 180. You know what I mean? To actually get to the other side and save it, I probably have to come over here and really do an eddy turn to get back in over on this side. Hell yeah. But there might be some moves where if you're going this way that you could start your rotation or something. But hell yeah, I just think in general you need to be working on your offside just as much as your onside. Alright, but hell yeah. But even in the center here, we are able to get that front end over a lot more. So even just having this thwart right here, no farther back position, because if you're going to make the cockpit, it's actually hard to wedge your feet in and get any farther back. But we're fairly balanced back here. You know what I mean? But still, take a foot off, half a foot either side, a 9-foot boat, 8-foot boat. And then from this compartment, you can do those back moves. And then it's just a matter of making the back of the boat as performance oriented as possible. Alright, let's see if you see any asymmetric design, because I think it is. I think we noticed that more of the rocker was on that tube And so I'm going to leave this plank of wood in just like this because yeah, I'm not getting very much rocker back here. And so that's just interesting. My boat has a longer floor out of the nose, and for river running, that's probably a good thing. A longer nose and more tapered. I think you do need a paddle cat end, because my front end is, you know, too much end out there. All right, and for a play boat, man, we just need this to rock back, you know, like right here, have the seat back just a little bit, have less rear end, and definitely a shorter front end. I need to get to the front, and if I'm right here on the front, this has to be a highly rocker. It has to feel like that, you know what I mean? And so let's show that right here, where if I'm like right here, hell yeah. You know what I mean? So even just rolling my boat backwards and having this be the front, like I actually can rocker this just a little bit. All right, hell yeah. So, and once we get those dynamics up the front, hell yeah, you know what I mean? I think you'd be able to surf even just kind of in this position, maybe make those two places narrow. But if I'm over at the front, hell yeah, I can maybe get this boat rocker. Yep, so there's enough rocker in this boat right now that I can do those more bow surfy type moves. And especially, you know, when getting kicked out of the wave and I'm trying to get back on, I want to really lean and get the back of the boat out of the water. All right, hell yeah, so this makes a lot of sense. If I'm doing a straight surf and I'm getting kicked off over the pile, my boat teeter-totters and we're going that way. So to actually get up front and paddle the boat back in, so I'm fine with that for tomorrow, is get here and then just kind of lay in on this and kind of paddle out to the side. I kind of have to be more centered on this. And that's where it just makes sense that actually the nose of the boat shouldn't have that 3/4 rocker. What I want on the nose of the boat is probably jump to the front and just feeling a nice even hinge. All right, hell yeah. So that's it. This is so cool because now we can make this boat more a little bit river runner from that perspective. When I jump here, I want these two surfaces to be railed and then also pivot forward. So this whole surface can be in the water, but then it has a sharp upward angle. So it comes here and then a sharp upward angle. So when I do put my knee right here, I'm fully hinging across this whole boat. And that's the one thing where my boat being at that 3/4 angles, it messes me up going into holes, you know what I mean? A diamond-shaped boat also can get totally turned, but it's because, and that's the superiorness currently of the Merlin. I'll give big props to that. That's the physics that I see on that boat that I do like, is the front end is two independent tubes. This floor is back. My floor is all the way up there. I have to like angle to it. That floor is a very straight section. So that just needs to get totally changed. All right, hell yeah. So I think I'm all set. I know exactly what I want for the first iteration now, especially with the play boat, and then how that can evolve into a river runner. But even, you know, like that being the kicker to being like, hey, when I go up front, I want an even level surface. So if I'm on this side, the other side has just as much pressure. That's the cool thing about a railed boat. If I'm on this side, the other tube is in contact and it has a decent amount of pressure. You know what I mean? It doesn't have none. And especially when this boat is so rounded and rockered, especially since we're putting the V-shape in, so now this V-shape is going to have a flat spot all the way across, and then it's going to have a nice smooth taper. You know, I want two tubes. You know, I just think that's superior, and then you don't have any well to get water filled in. All right, hell yeah. And so the design consideration of that, I want two cat tubes coming up. They could just make this point, see that point right there, and then you could have a vacancy in the middle. I wouldn't mind if they were more straight. I mean, if we're following the curve of the boat, I think you do want a little bit of curve. I don't think it's bent well. Or you could just literally have them come out straight. There is even benefits that they come, you know, they start here and then they bulb out that way, and then you have another vacancy here where you actually have a stabbing point that way. Just because in R1 you're always going to be stabbing at these funky angles, you know what I mean? But that'll be down the road and stuff. But just the fact that you want these to be paddle cat tubes, and then for design consideration, you have the I-beams come to wherever you need them to come, so you can have that pivot. All right, hell yeah. And it's these tubes that need to come to, they actually have to not stair step, but hinge. You know, you're going to have definitely a hinged surface, so, and that's going to be like right about here, so when you push on it, you're going to have a flat hinge. And then you can have material from the floor come up and meet that surface, and then you would fill it in with an inflated, kind of a triangle thwart here where you could, sit in it, but it's not going to take in water and stuff. All right, hell yeah. What I mentioned there might have not made any sense, but if you do have fabric coming from the floor at an angle, sure, that's all going to take in water. And so, but definitely from a design consideration, I would want the cockpit to be the only thing that takes in water, because that's plenty, and I want it quickly draining. If you do have surfaces like these that are a benefit of slow draining, excellent, you know what I mean? You can fill them up with water and just have really slow drains on them. And then that way you can like plug into something, build up water into those chambers. That also would be useful. But just the whole idea of this thing being a complete bathtub absolutely sucks for holes. And like, if you take the river like the Stikine, you are going to be stuck in a hole. You're either going to be just and swimming and picking up crazy pieces, swimming and attaching yourself to the boat. And I guess I'm just saying, like, if you're in a hefty hole and your boat is taking in water, I mean, well, on the Stikine, maybe you do want that, but you still want dynamics to make your boat move. So, all right, hell yeah. Yeah, and let's take a step back. I would love to run bigger rivers as long as the physics make sense. And currently, to me, I'm running a very unstable boat where never has the physics made sense, or I'm just like, oh, I feel super confident. But what I bring to the table is the dynamics of surf, because if you're thinking that R1 shouldn't be able to get into a hole and then surf its way out of a hole, if that's just not an option, you know what I mean? I think it is, and I think that's a necessary thing, that when you're in a hole, you're just like, hell yeah, now work on your skills to get out. And that's asking a lot for me and the other athletes that are taking up this sport, just because the footage, we don't have all the footage. And the second someone does something, like, now you know you can do it. That's why this sport is special to me, you know what I mean? I don't think Dane Jackson can R1 I think it would take him a while. His first rounds, he'd be like, oh, this is crazy. Even though he OC1 freestyles. Now, as I'm saying that, I'm just like, shit, do I have to cut this out? But hell yeah, that is one of the special things. Like, you take any kayaker and you're like, throw them in an R1, it's like, I don't know if a lot of the skills transfer. Alright, hell yeah. And, and I'll stand by my Dane Jackson statement, because all the R1 athletes currently are not OC1 athletes. They're not born in the sport of OC1, going to Worlds, and, there's kind of a few that I follow of the OC1 athletes that I don't think I've ever seen them R1, you know what I mean? And so this dynamics is a little bit wonky, you know what I mean? From that perspective, it's a new thing to learn. It's like longboarding and then being like, oh yeah, there's the skateboard. Well, a longboarder ain't going to be able to do a skateboard. And I'm not saying the longboarders can't skateboard. I'm not saying the OC1 athletes can't R1, but it still takes like a long time to learn basic skills, because the physics is just almost junk. You know what I mean? You're just in a craft that's just like, no one thought it could be able to do anything. And like, even me, it's like the spins, it took me years to figure out, like, oh no, like if I actually analyze these and look at the physics, I can repeat the physics. And it was after 4 years of skateboarding that I realized, it could be really tricky physics to repeat, but it is repeatable. And then the other sport I compare it to is skiing in the 90s on really thin skis. And and that's why I asked the other R1ers out there. It's just like, what do you want to R1, what do you want to see an R1 do? And I was most impressed with one of the Spud riders from West Virginia, or that area on the Ocoee, maybe Tennessee, I guess. I think they did like a first, like they rolled off a waterfall and then did a 180. And so you would be able to do that in this if it was just shorter. A lot of this, the front ends and the back ends are not very useful currently. Alright, hell yeah. So I'll leave it with this. There's so many firsts in this sport. And if you do a first, for the love of God, film it. And then put it on many platforms as possible. Because seeing is believing. If someone sees what you did, then they can repeat it. They can look at the physics and be like, yeah, we can do that now. Like, what you've shown is skill. And it's not fluke. It's it's repeatable physics that we can all take. And so that's why I just also leave with the question is just like, what would you want to see like the best R1 athletes doing? Like, what trick would you like for them to pull off, even if you were never able to pull it off? That's the world of kayaking. Alright, hell yeah. You can spend a lifetime of kayaking and still have tricks that are unattainable. And so, but the fact that they are attainable, it's just like, yes, with the right combination of skill and practice and hopefully body type and genetics, hey, maybe you fit into a category that, no, you do have the potential for that. So that is where R1ing still has a lot of stuff like that. Is like, what if someone puts a whole lot of skill into it? You know what I mean? And even just as an athlete, am I R1ing every day? No, I don't have any rivers near me. And so it just shows you that the potential is there for, especially like an OC1er that dedicates their life to R1. Hell yeah. And you give them the right type of boat, whether it's a play boat and a river runner. Those are the two that I'm trying to work on. Like, give a river runner that, runs like a river, like a creek boat. Give them a play boat that can play like a play boat. And so, hell yeah. If we're able to do it, excellent. If we're able to make quality steps in that direction, I think that's, yeah, so it's just kind of fascinating. But that is cool that a lot of the OC1 athletes, like at the world level, haven't really taken up this sport. So it's kind of, that's what I love about it. It's like, it feels renegade. We're still in the 3 decades leading into our, almost 20 years now, 20 to 30 years for some people maybe, but definitely at least 20. Hell yeah. Where this sport is, grassroots. It's for athletes that are taking it, showing us what this sport would be if it was pro. And so that's cool. And anyone doing anything in R1 is adding to it. And that's the cool thing, is like, and there's so many firsts, there's so many new things, there's so many nuances, there's so many ways to enjoy the sport. And yeah. Alright, hell yeah. And R1 is, to me, I think R1 is one paddle blade and a position that kind of looks like this. You know what I mean? It's not sitting down, and it's not OC1. It's not kneeling in a cockpit. Now, whether that position is fully strapped in an R1, creature craft, the other aspect, that's still R1. What I currently love about the sport is this cockpit and the freedom of it. You know what I mean? Alright, hell yeah. The Colorado boaters have shown that this cockpit is hella. And even at the Whitewater Center, man, there's people just trying to do, just doing stern stalls in that cockpit. So, my vision is to get all those benefits from the center cockpit. But the fact that you have so many numerous positions and movement, and you can lock your feet in, and you can release your feet. And so to me, that freedom of motion is, what I hold near and dear to R1. Alright, hell yeah. So thanks for joining me tonight. I think for me personally, I have an idea of, it's coming together. So that's pretty sweet. So leave your comments, and thanks for joining me on this one. Hell yeah.